When Nazi Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, the once formidable Kriegsmarine lay scattered across European waters, battered, broken, and defeated. What remained of Hitler's naval fleet faced an uncertain fate. Destroyers, cruisers, and capital ships that had once challenged Allied naval supremacy now awaited their final orders. This is what happened to Germany's surface fleet after World War II. The final months of the war had been catastrophic for the Kriegsmarine. Allied bombing raids had devastated German shipyards, and the Soviet advance from the east trapped major vessels in Baltic ports. Many ships were deliberately scuttled by their own crews to prevent capture. Others were destroyed in their harbors by Allied aircraft. By the time of surrender, the German surface fleet was a shadow of its former strength, yet hundreds of vessels still remained afloat. Admiral Karl Dönitz, who had succeeded Hitler as head of state, ordered all German naval forces to cease hostilities immediately. Across the North Sea, the Baltic and Norwegian fjords, Kriegsmarine vessels hauled down the swastika and awaited Allied instructions. The surrender was comprehensive and unconditional. Within days, British, American, and Soviet naval officers began cataloging what remained of Germany's once proud fleet. The larger warships presented an immediate problem. Germany's surviving capital ships, including the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen and the light cruisers Nuremberg and Leipzig, were valuable prizes. The Allies quickly realized that these vessels held intelligence value, containing advanced fire control systems, radar technology, and engineering innovations developed during the war. The Tripartite Naval Commission, established in August 1945, was tasked with dividing the spoils among the victorious powers. The most famous survivor was the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, which had fought alongside the battleship Bismarck in 1941 and survived the war largely intact. The United States claimed her as a war prize, sailing the ship across the Atlantic to Boston in January 1946. American engineers studied her propulsion systems and armor layout before she was assigned a more macabre purpose, a target ship for the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. In July 1946, Prinz Eugen survived both nuclear blasts but was fatally contaminated by radiation. She capsized in Kwajalein Atoll in December 1946, where her rusting hull remains visible to this day. The Soviet Union, eager to rebuild its shattered navy, demanded substantial compensation. Under the Potsdam Agreement, the Soviet Union received numerous vessels, including the heavy cruiser Lutzow, renamed Petropavlovsk, and the light cruiser Nuremberg, which became the Admiral Makarov. Soviet engineers dismantled and studied these ships extensively, incorporating German design elements into their post-war naval construction programs. The Nuremberg served in the Soviet Navy until 1959. It was an ironic fate for a ship named after the city where Nazi war criminals were tried. Britain, despite having the world's largest navy, also claimed its share. The light cruiser Leipzig was allocated to the Royal Navy but never saw active service. Her condition was poor, her machinery worn beyond economical repair. In 1946, she was towed to the North Sea and used as a target for weapons testing before being scuttled. Other vessels met similar fates, studied briefly, then destroyed. Not all ships went to the major powers. Smaller vessels were distributed among Allied nations rebuilding their fleets. France received several destroyers and escort vessels, which were refitted and incorporated into the Marine Nationale. Norway and Denmark took possession of coastal defense ships and patrol craft, using them for training and mine-clearing operations. Even China received several vessels through various Allied channels. But the vast majority of the Kriegsmarine faced a simpler destiny: destruction. In British and American occupation zones, hundreds of smaller warships, destroyers, torpedo boats, minesweepers, and auxiliary vessels were systematically dismantled. Some were sold for scrap, their steel melted down to help rebuild war-torn Europe. Others were deliberately sunk in deep water, deemed too damaged or obsolete to be worth preserving. the Baltic Sea became a particularly tragic graveyard. As Soviet forces advanced in early 1945, German commanders ordered the scuttling of numerous vessels to prevent capture. In Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, and other naval bases, ships were blown up or scuttled in shallow waters. After the war, the Allies faced the monumental task of clearing these wrecks to reopen shipping lanes. Some remain on the seabed to this day, rusting monuments to Germany's naval ambitions. The most ambitious destruction program mirrored Operation Deadlight, which had disposed of the U-boats. Throughout 1946 and 1947, Allied forces towed damaged warships into the North Sea and the Atlantic, where they were sunk by gunfire or by scuttling charges. The goal was twofold: to eliminate potential future threats and to clear crowded harbors for reconstruction. Dozens of destroyers and auxiliary vessels met their end in these operations, joining the U-boats on the ocean floor. Yet some ships escaped this fate through unusual circumstances. Several incomplete vessels in German shipyards were finished by the Allies and either incorporated into their fleets or sold to third parties. The aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin, Germany's only carrier and never completed, was captured by Soviet forces in Stettin. After being towed to Leningrad for study, she was used as a target ship and sank in the Baltic in 1947. Her wreck was discovered in 2006, lying upright in relatively shallow water. The redistribution of German naval technology had a profound effect on post-war naval development. Allied researchers found that German engineers had made significant advances in radar systems, fire control computers, and propulsion efficiency. British and American naval designers studied these innovations closely, incorporating the lessons into their own Cold War-era warships. The Soviet Union, which lacked advanced naval technology, benefited most dramatically. Captured German vessels provided blueprints for a generation of Soviet cruisers and destroyers. That transfer became a source of tension as the Grand Alliance fractured into Cold War opposition. What began as an equitable division of war prizes quickly turned into an arms race. The very ships that had fought against the Allies now helped fuel that competition. Germany's naval legacy, scattered among former enemies, paradoxically contributed to the military buildup in the late 1940s and the 1950s. By 1948, most of the surviving Kriegsmarine vessels had been disposed of, distributed, or dismantled. Only a handful remained in active service, sailing under foreign flags and often bearing little resemblance to their original configuration. The rapid elimination of Germany's surface fleet reflected Allied determination to prevent any resurgence of German military power. Under occupation agreements, Germany was forbidden from maintaining significant naval forces. The Kriegsmarine had ceased to exist. Yet a few vessels survived to tell their story. Today, several German warships from World War II remain accessible as museum ships or memorial sites. The most notable is the destroyer Z-1 Leberecht Maas, though she was sunk in 1940 and later salvaged. More commonly preserved are smaller vessels, torpedo boats, patrol craft, and auxiliary ships displayed in maritime museums across Europe. In Germany itself, the memory of the Kriegsmarine remains complex and controversial. The service participated in numerous war crimes, including the transportation of troops during invasion operations and support for the Holocaust through Operation Hannibal and other evacuations that prioritize military personnel over refugees. Post-war Germany has been selective in commemorating naval history, focusing on the experiences of ordinary sailors rather than celebrating the institution itself. The wrecks of Kriegsmarine vessels continue to be discovered. In the Baltic Sea, underwater archaeologists regularly find scuttled ships, some in remarkable condition. These wrecks serve as time capsules, preserving equipment, personal effects, and sometimes human remains. Environmental concerns have grown in recent years as aging munitions and fuel oil leak from corroding hulls, creating ecological hazards in busy shipping lanes. Perhaps the most poignant legacy of the Kriegsmarine lies not in the ships themselves, but in the men who served aboard them. Over 30,000 German sailors died during the war. many in the final chaotic months as the Reich collapsed. The evacuation operations in the Baltic, particularly the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff with up to 9,000 casualties, represent some of the greatest maritime disasters in history. These losses are remembered in German naval memorials, particularly at Lebow, where the Marine Ehrenmal honors all sailors lost at sea. The physical destruction of the Kriegsmarine was thorough and deliberate. The Allies were determined to eliminate Germany's capacity to wage naval warfare, and they succeeded comprehensively. Unlike the U-boats, which have captured public imagination through films and literature, the surface fleet has largely faded from popular memory. Yet the influence of German naval technology persisted long after the last ship was scrapped or scuttled. Today, the scattered remnants of the Kriegsmarine rest on seabeds from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Some, like the Prinz Eugen, lie in tropical waters thousands of miles from their home ports. Others rest in the cold Baltic, not far from where they were built. These underwater graveyards attract divers and researchers who document the wrecks and preserve their histories before corrosion erases them entirely. The fate of Germany's surface fleet after World War II was swift and final. Within 3 years of surrender, the once mighty Kriegsmarine had been divided, studied, and largely destroyed. The ships that remained in service did so under foreign flags, their German origins gradually forgotten as they were modified and renamed. The technology they carried influenced naval development throughout the Cold War, ensuring that Germany's wartime innovations lived on even as the ships themselves rusted away. For historians and naval enthusiasts, the Kriegsmarine represents a cautionary tale of ambition and defeat. Germany entered World War II with a modern but relatively small fleet, never able to challenge British naval supremacy. By war's end, that fleet lay in ruins, scuttled, sunk, or seized. The story of what happened to these ships after 1945 is one of systematic elimination, technological exploitation, and eventual obscurity. The empire of steel that once sailed under the swastika now rests in silence, scattered across the ocean floor, a testament to the total defeat of Nazi Germany and the thoroughness of Allied victory. The process of dismantling Germany's naval infrastructure extended far beyond the ships themselves. German naval bases, from Wilhelmshaven to Kiel, had been transformed during the war into fortified complexes with massive concrete U-boat pens, repair facilities, and ammunition depots. The Allies faced the daunting task of demilitarizing these installations while simultaneously preventing the Soviet Union from gaining exclusive access to valuable facilities in the Eastern Zone. Demilitarizing those sites proved complex. In the British occupation zone, the Royal Navy took control of the major naval bases along the North Sea coast. Wilhelmshaven, once the primary base of the High Seas Fleet, became a center for ship disposal operations. British engineers oversaw the systematic dismantling of shore facilities, removing weapons systems, demolishing fortifications, and clearing harbors of scuttled vessels. The famous U-boat pens, with their reinforced concrete roofs up to 7 meters thick, proved nearly impossible to destroy. Many remain standing today, repurposed as museums, cultural centers, or simply left as indestructible monuments to the war. Kiel, Germany's largest naval base, suffered a different fate. Located in the British zone but close to the Soviet-controlled areas, it became a focal point of Cold War tensions. The massive submarine construction yards were partially demolished, but much of the infrastructure remained intact. By the early 1950s, as West Germany began limited rearmament under NATO auspices, Kiel gradually returned to its role as a naval center, though under strict Allied supervision. Cold tensions shaped its recovery. The fate of German naval personnel paralleled that of the ships they once served. Approximately 700,000 men had served in the Kriegsmarine during the war, and by 1945, hundreds of thousands were in Allied captivity or awaiting demobilization. The process of repatriating and reintegrating these sailors into civilian life proved complex and often traumatic. Many returned to cities reduced to rubble, their families scattered or lost. The human cost was traumatic. Senior officers faced particular scrutiny. At the Nuremberg trials, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, who had commanded the Kriegsmarine until 1943, was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. His successor, Karl Donitz, received a 10-year sentence. The trials established that planning and waging aggressive war constituted crimes, and naval officers who had participated in invasion operations or supported atrocities faced justice. Lower-ranking personnel underwent denazification proceedings with varying outcomes depending on their service records and the zone in which they surrendered. The trials set important precedents. The technical expertise of German naval engineers did not go to waste. As the Cold War intensified, both Western and Soviet powers sought to employ German specialists in their rearmament programs. The Soviet Union pursued this most aggressively, relocating entire engineering teams to its territory. These specialists contributed significantly to Soviet naval development, particularly in submarine design. By the mid-1950s, most had been allowed to return to Germany, their knowledge thoroughly exploited. Expertise was repurposed by former enemies. Minesweepers constituted a crucial category of vessels. Germany had laid extensive minefields in defensive operations, particularly along the North Sea and Baltic coasts. After the war, German minesweeper crews were compelled to continue their dangerous work under Allied supervision, clearing the very mines they had laid. The work was dangerous, and it continued long after hostilities ended. This forced labor continued until 1948 and proved costly. Dozens of German sailors died in mine-clearing operations after the war had officially ended. One of the most ambitious post-war operations involved raising scuttled vessels. Throughout the Baltic, particularly in shallow harbors, sunken vessels posed hazards to navigation. Salvage companies, often employing former German naval personnel, spent years raising wrecks, cutting them up for scrap, or refloating vessels that could be repaired and sold. This dangerous work continued well into the 1950s, providing employment in a devastated economy. The influence of captured German naval technology on Allied post-war development cannot be overstated. Fire control systems that had allowed German ships to achieve impressive accuracy were studied intensively. The Prince Eugene's radar and range-finding equipment influenced American cruiser designs of the late 1940s. British naval engineers examined German damage control systems and armor schemes, incorporating improvements into their own vessels. Perhaps most significantly, German advances in naval propulsion influenced Allied thinking. High-pressure steam turbines and efficient boiler designs developed for German destroyers and cruisers represented the cutting edge of 1940s technology. Soviet shipbuilders, lacking experience with such systems, relied heavily on captured German vessels as templates. American naval architects, while more advanced in many areas, still found aspects of German engineering worthy of study and emulation. The cultural memory of the Kriegsmarine differs markedly between Germany and other nations. In Britain and the United States, German surface raiders like the Bismarck and Admiral Graf Spee occupy a peculiar position. They are respected as worthy adversaries, and their stories are told with a mix of admiration for seamanship and relief at their defeat. Documentary films, books, and even models celebrate famous engagements, keeping the memory of these ships alive. In Germany, the situation is more complex. The Kriegsmarine's participation in Nazi atrocities, including providing naval support for invasions and, in some cases, direct involvement in war crimes, has led to a more critical examination of its legacy. Modern German naval museums present a balanced view, acknowledging both the technical achievements and the moral failures of the service. The focus has shifted from celebrating martial glory to remembering the human cost and learning from history's darkest chapters. International law regarding shipwrecks has evolved partly due to disputes over Kriegsmarine vessels. Many wrecks are considered war graves, protected under international conventions. However, enforcement remains difficult. and illegal salvage of metal from wrecks continues. The Federal Republic of Germany has sought to protect sites where German sailors died, negotiating agreements with countries in whose waters these wrecks lie. These efforts balance historical preservation, respect for the dead, and practical concerns about navigation and environmental protection. The physical remnants of the Kriegsmarine are gradually disappearing. Corrosion takes its toll on submerged wrecks, while surface vessels preserved as museums face constant maintenance challenges. The Prince Eugen's hull in Kwajalein continues to deteriorate, occasionally shedding parts that wash ashore. Baltic wrecks collapse as metal fatigues and marine organisms break down structure. Within another few decades, many of these sites will be unrecognizable, their stories preserved only in archives and memories. Yet, new discoveries continue. Advanced sonar and submersible technology allow researchers to locate and document wrecks in deep water previously inaccessible. Each discovery adds details to our understanding of the war's final days, how crews tried to save their ships, what cargo they carried, and where they met their end. These underwater archaeological sites provide tangible connections to events now 80 years past. The story of the Kriegsmarine's end is, ultimately, a story of total defeat and transformation. No other major navy in history was so completely dismantled. Its ships were divided among former enemies, its personnel scattered, its bases repurposed or destroyed. Within a decade of surrender, barely a trace remained of the force that had challenged Allied control of the seas. The rapid and thorough elimination of German naval power stands as a testament to Allied determination to prevent any resurgence of militarism. Today, as historians continue to study the Second World War and its aftermath, the fate of the Kriegsmarine offers important lessons. It demonstrates the consequences of aggressive warfare, the difficulty of rebuilding after total defeat, and the ways military technology transcends political boundaries. The ships may be gone, but their story of ambition, destruction, and the long shadow of war continues to resonate across the decades.